To start this tutorial, we want to first make a new project. So to do that, from the WebGME CLI, create a new project. CD into there. Gotta go through all the installation and then start WebGME. At which point, open your web browser of choice and navigate to the web page. In this example, we're going to create a new project, and to save time, I'm importing it from my demo here. But any project similar or with the same sort of needs will work. So our next step is to change it so only certain numbers of gates can appear in certain blocks. So in a result block, we actually want only one input port. So we go ahead and change that in this contains relationship. We do the same for the input block. Now, for the logic gate, everything has two inputs and one output, except for the not. But first, we can change this output to 1, because every type of gate has just one. Now we'll need to break up the not, because it is different and only has one input. So maybe we'll make a new type. And not is in fact a gate rather than a logic gate, which we should rename to be something like to input logic gate. Now we can more readily do this. Every kind of gate has only one output port. Two input logic gates have two output ports, however, which is different than the NOT gate, which has only one. Alright, so that's getting pretty close now, but if we were to make a new child, a new diagram, we would see that the gates aren't present here. Although we would be limited to only putting in the correct number, they don't automatically populate. So how do we do that? Well, every gate should have one output port. So in the gate, in your composition, drag in the one output port. You'll then notice that every type of thing of type gate also has the one output port present now. Next, in the two input logic gate, we can see that the output port's already there, and now we can add the two input ports to those. We also note that the output port can't be added since it's already there. The two input ports are now present in all of those types. In the weird case of not, we can go ahead and add it ourselves there, and same thing for an input, output port, add the output port, and for the result, add the input port. And that's it, all of them now. So we can see that all of these types now have the correct numbers of ports, and they can't be changed. We can't drag a new one in. So if we go to our diagram now, we'll see that all of these gates now have the correct thing showing automatically, even in the palette over here. And if we drag it on, they're automatically added. If we went into this block, we can't add one. We also can't delete a port here because it's required to have that number. And as long as you set up the connections correctly, you can then drag them just as you'd expect. However, there's still a problem in that if you ran this, a plugin on this, it wouldn't know that you didn't, it wouldn't warn you that this is an incorrect plugin since there are ports hanging open. So how do we want to fix that? In order to fix that part of this, the first thing we're going to want to do is create a plugin. So in Terminal here, we're going to want to pause the terminal with Control-C, and then create a new plugin with the command WebGME new plugin. We'll call it unconnected port plugin. You can then start WebGME again since the plugin has been created. Now, we're going to want to navigate to the plugin we just created. So find it here in your browser. So we have the project demo. Open that up. So here we have the basic plugin. So in order to make this plugin check for the unconnected ports, we need to add a couple things. First, we need to create a global variable called missing connections, or something else, depending on what you're actually searching for in your case. So in order to do that, we go ahead and go up in here and add equals false. Then what we're going to want to do is go ahead and add or modify the visit diagrams section. Now, a lot of this code is going to end up being very similar to the code that we did in lecture in class, but the visit diagrams section as a whole should look like, or the call to the visit diagrams function should look like this. And that should go under the activate node here and replace all these things that are generated by default. You also don't need this stuff. Now we're going to actually need the visit diagrams function. Which will look like this, which is much like the one in class that we did. But in case you forgot or are here otherwise, we load the subtree, so all the children of the node in question for each diagram of the root node, and then for each of those, we find the diagram. And if it's of type diagram, we visit the diagram in particular for each node in the thing. So that means we also need the visit diagram function from here. The visit diagram function here, again, very similar to what we've done before, but for each diagram that we visit from the visit diagrams, we just need to visit each child, because in our case, each child will have some ports. So for each child in the children, we want to check the ports. So we also need a check ports function. And the check ports function is like this. First, we have the variables we need to go through each port. So for each, we get the ports for that child in particular, and for each port, we just want to check, we want to get a collection of the destinations it has and the sources it has. And then we just want to go ahead, we don't need this last line here. We want to go ahead and check for each port, is the destinations 0 and the length 0, or on the sources 0. So if both destinations and sources are 0, that means the port in question is neither a destination or a source ever, which means it's unconnected. If that's the case, we want to set missing connections to be true if both of these are true. Then we return, we do that for every port. So what happens then is if every after we've visited every diagram, if any ports are missing connections, they'll have set missing connections to true and will throw an error indicating that. Otherwise, we will set the success true and return success. So that should be the file we need for this. The plugin should be done there. And then what we want to do is, back in our results here, we want to go into our diagram, go into its meta, look at valid plugins, there we go, and select unconnected port plugin. Then we can run that plugin up here. We'll get a notification up here. We'll see that there are ports missing, and we should get ports missing since there are indeed. Now, if we wanted to add 2 results over here, and plug those in, all connections are connected now, so we can run this again and get the results that now we've got the green or the clear signal